Sign this, or your career is over. Welcome to the San Diego office of Clarion Ridge Holdings. Mid-July. The AC struggled against the rising heat. Just beyond the glass conference room wall, interns shuffled past, unaware of the storm building inside. Garrett's voice dropped to a low, oily whisper. Think it through, Dana. One word from me, and you're blacklisted from every firm west of the Mississippi. I kept my expression blank, even as a flood of memories surged, late nights, rewriting investment briefs he'd later present as his own. Credit stolen, my voice dismissed. Just last week, I'd flagged irregularities in payment schedules tied to a pair of vendors that didn't add up. Garrett told me to let it go. I didn't. I should have been afraid. Maybe part of me was. But mostly, I felt calm, focused. Because what Garrett didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this exact moment. For weeks, I picked up the pen, heart steady now. I signed, but not before changing one word on the standard resignation template buried halfway down near the legalese no one ever reads. A single word, one that flipped a quiet departure into a ticking legal weapon. Before I go any further, you should know something. Power. It's not about titles. It's about leverage and knowing exactly when to use it. If you've ever felt cornered by someone who thought you were powerless, keep listening. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about value, worth, precision. My name is Dana Holloway. I'm 48, divorced, senior compliance director with 18 years of experience in corporate finance and regulatory law. And no, I don't make rash moves. I build backup plans. I read every contract until the ink bleeds into my memory. My late mother was a forensic accountant. She taught me that the smallest clause can crack a case wide open. That's how I rose from a mid-level analyst in Des Moines to managing cross-border audits for firms handling billions. And it's why, 3 months after Garrett Bledsoe transferred in from New York with big talk and a trail of burned bridges, I started watching the numbers and him closely, because things weren't adding up. And when Garrett tried to force me out, he had no idea that the letter he handed me was the very fuse I planned to light. Tall, charismatic, calculated. The kind of man who sealed deals with a handshake and buried consequences behind a smile. Garrett Bledsoe had swaggered into Clarion Ridge Holdings like he owned the West Coast. At first, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, but then the fractures showed. It began subtly, a quarterly bonus spreadsheet with inflated figures that didn't match payroll approvals, an expense reimbursement submitted for a vendor I'd never seen in our system. I assumed it was an oversight, until I compared archived statements. The numbers had been manipulated. I brought it up carefully. These transfers don't align with our policy, I said during a casual walkthrough. I think we should flag them. Garrett didn't even glance away from his laptop. Not your concern, Dana. Just process them. I didn't push. I documented. Printed every version of every modified report. Archived internal approvals with mismatched timestamps. Compiled a digital folder of red flags. Because men like Garrett count on silence, on fear, on people being too cautious or too tired to push back. Then came the performance review. After nearly 2 decades of spotless evaluations, I was suddenly labeled rigid and uncooperative. He was setting the stage for termination. 2 weeks later, it came. A closed-door meeting, no HR present, just Garrett, a resignation letter, and a threat to burn my career down if I didn't sign. I did. But not before I edited one word. A word that would define the entire outcome. He snatched the page like he just won a chess match. I stood, calmly, looked him in the eye, and said, "I'll take a signed copy, please." His smirk faltered. HR will send it. I nodded. Because tomorrow, HR would send more than that. And Garrett Bledsoe was about to discover what happens when you try to silence someone who understands the power of paper. I walked out without a sound. No slammed doors, no dramatics. That's not how real victories work. I returned to my office, packed my belongings in one box, and left a clearly labeled envelope on my desk. Inside was every piece of evidence I'd compiled, manipulated transactions, unauthorized directives, bloated vendor payments, each one traceable, each one undeniable. And at the top, a copy of the resignation letter, with one very intentional phrase signed under duress. where I had crossed out voluntary and written in forced resignation under duress. It was a phrase I'd learned from weeks of after-hours reading case law, state labor codes, wrongful termination precedents. Just 6 words. Enough to turn a standard exit into a legal live wire. I slid the envelope into my leather bag and checked my phone. You did it. The message blinked across my screen. It was from Harper Lynn, my closest friend in legal, and the only person who knew everything. Yes. On my way now, I replied. Harper worked at a firm called Ashton and Brantley, one of the regional firms our company retained for employment disputes. We'd met years ago at a compliance summit in Santa Clara. While most attorneys liked policies more than people, Harper had a sharp eye and a soft spot for employees chewed up by toxic management. She also happened to be the one who gave me the exact phrase to write on that letter. We met at a small cafe near the harbor 2 blocks from Clarion Ridge's San Diego office. She didn't say anything at first, just studied my face over her black coffee. You kept calm, she asked finally. I nodded. She smiled. That's half the battle. The other half? I said, sliding the envelope across the table, is letting HR walk directly into the mess Garrett built. Harper flipped through the folder. She paused at one page. Vendor kickbacks. I nodded. Same 2 vendors. Every month since Garrett arrived. The math is clean and damning. She closed the folder. Dana, this isn't just wrongful termination. If this sticks, you're talking procurement fraud, corporate exposure, possibly even federal attention. I met her eyes. That's why I have backups, copies, metadata, timestamps, all of it. She exhaled slowly. I'll forward this to their in-house legal tomorrow, after HR finishes pretending nothing's wrong. The next morning, I arrived at HR exactly at 9 a.m., holding my single box of things. Karen, the HR manager, gave me a brittle smile. Dana, thanks for coming in. We'll finalize everything and have someone escort you out. I returned her smile politely. Of course. I'll also need a signed acknowledgement of the resignation for my records. She hesitated, shuffling papers. Well, actually, we'll send that digitally. I'll wait, I said gently but firmly. Today's fine. She blinked, then stood up to find her director. And just like that, the tone of the room changed. That's company policy, isn't it? Karen blinked clearly, caught off guard. Yes? Give me a moment. She stepped into the HR director's office, the frosted glass door closing behind her. I could see 2 silhouettes inside, gesturing quietly. 30 seconds later, she returned. Her expression was different now, tighter, less polished. The director would like to speak with you. I followed her down the hall, my pulse steady my heels, quiet against the tile. Matthew Gaines, head of HR, stood when I entered. Tall, sharp-featured, usually unreadable. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Then, without a word, he slid a sheet of paper toward me. My resignation letter. With my handwritten amendment glaring up from the page, forced resignation under duress. He looked at me. Ms. Holloway? What is this? I met his eyes without flinching. It's exactly what happened. I signed that letter under threat, behind closed doors. No HR present, and I've documented everything. For a few seconds, silence stretched between us. Then Matthew exhaled, adjusting his tie. I see. We'll need to review this before finalizing any documentation. I stood calm as ever. I'll wait for your response. So will my attorney. As I stepped into the hallway, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. Garrett Bledsoe. And if this story stayed with you, if it stirred something quiet but strong, consider subscribing. The next chapter's already unfolding, and trust me, you'll want to be there when the next wave begins. He was leaning by the elevator, laughing, with another exec still riding the high of thinking he'd forced me out cleanly. He didn't even glance my way. That was fine, because tomorrow HR would summon him. And Garrett was about to learn what happens when you threaten a woman who knows what one altered phrase can do to a career. The next morning at exactly 8:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. I was mid-sip of my coffee when I saw the caller ID Clarion HR direct line. I took a slow breath and answered. Dana Holloway speaking. Ms. Holloway, this is Matthew Gaines. We've reviewed the document you submitted. We'd like you to come in this morning for a formal discussion regarding your resignation and certain concerns that have been raised. I let the pause linger. Will my legal representative be welcome? Another pause. Yes, that would be advisable. I hung up, texted Harper, and met her at our usual cafe by 8:45. They called, she asked, eyes still on her tablet. I nodded. Good, she said with a satisfied smile. That means they know they're in real trouble now. Let's go. Harper and I arrived at the HR floor just before 9:00 a.m. The change was immediate. No morning banter, no laughter from the break room, just quick footsteps and lowered gazes. Doors shut with a little too much urgency as we passed. The air had shifted. Inside the main conference room, Matthew Gaines sat at the head of the table. Karen from HR sat to his right, her usual forced smile replaced with something tight and brittle. To my surprise, Victor Ramos, the company's internal counsel, was also present. I'd only ever seen him during quarterly updates. Ms. Holloway. Ms. Lynn, Matthew began, his tone stiff and careful. Thank you for coming. I nodded. Harper returned a polite glance, but her expression was cool and unreadable. We've reviewed the resignation letter and the circumstances you outlined. Matthew continued, the language you added raises concerns, as do the supporting documents you submitted. I held his gaze. Everything is documented. I wasn't looking to start a war, Matthew, but Garrett Bledsoe gave me no other option. He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable now. Victor spoke for the first time. If these discrepancies are accurate, and our preliminary review suggests they are, we're looking at more than just an HR issue. This could carry serious compliance and legal implications. Harper leaned forward slightly. We're glad that's clear. My client's concern is accountability. We expect the company to take meaningful action, starting with Mr. Bledsoe. Matthew's jaw tightened. Mr. Bledsoe has been asked to attend a meeting later this morning. My pulse quickened for a beat. It was starting. Has he been informed about the financial audit? Harper asked. Matthew shook his head. Not yet. We want to hear his side first, Victor added. But we intend to investigate this fully. I leaned back, voice even. I hope so. Because if it's not handled internally, I'm prepared to escalate. Matthew nodded once. Understood. An hour later, I returned to the desk they'd temporarily assigned me in the compliance wing. I had barely begun sorting files when I saw him. Garrett, striding across the floor, flanked by Karen and Matthew. His posture was tight, his mouth set. Not nervous yet, but the smile was gone. And the building was quieter than usual. Not yet. Garrett's jaw was set, eyes sharp and unreadable. To him, this was just another flare-up, another performance review he could talk or threaten his way out of. But something was different today. No one smiled at him. No head nods. No greetings from the analysts or assistants he used to charm. People looked away as he passed. Garrett didn't seem to notice. He walked into the glass-walled conference room at the end of the hallway, flanked by Matthew and Karen. Harper stood quietly beside me. He doesn't know yet, she murmured. I nodded. He will. We both turned toward the glass as Matthew Gaines slid a manila folder across the table. Garrett opened it lazily at first, then froze. His eyes scanned the first page. The corner of his mouth twitched. The signature smirk faltered. He said something. I couldn't hear it. Matthew shook his head in response. Victor Ramos leaned forward, tapping a section inside the folder. Garrett's shoulders squared, instantly defensive. His jaw tightened. Arms crossed, Harper whispered again. And there it is. A beat later, Garrett's eyes lifted and met mine through the glass. This time, I didn't look away. For the first time since he transferred to Clarion Ridge, I saw it not arrogance, not irritation, fear. The same man who once laughed while tearing down others had just realized the walls weren't going to bend for him this time. Inside that room, surrounded by 3 senior executives, his composure cracked. Matthew spoke again, calm and measured. Garrett leaned back, arms folding tighter as if trying to physically contain the panic rising inside. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked toward Victor. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Body language tells the truth when words don't. By noon, Harper and I were called back to HR. Garrett wasn't there, but the air inside the room felt thick with tension. Matthew folded his hands on the table. His face gave nothing away. "We've placed Mr. Bledsoe on administrative leave," he said, effective immediately pending a full investigation. I didn't smile. Not yet, because this wasn't over. But it was the first time since all of this began that I felt the ground shift in the right direction. I met Matthew's eyes. "And what exactly does that mean?" Victor Ramos responded before he could. "It means Mr. Bledsoe has been relieved of all duties. His system access has been revoked, and he's been instructed not to contact any Clarion Ridge employees. Standard protocol," he added, "as we investigate both the financial discrepancies and the claims of a hostile work environment." Harper gave a measured nod. "That's a start." Matthew exhaled. "We've also retained an independent auditing firm to review all vendor transactions approved under Garrett's oversight." A small knot in my chest eased, not quite relief, but something close. "Validation, maybe?" "We'll cooperate fully," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I assume that includes interviews with other team members?" Victor gave a curt nod. "Yes. In fact, 2 employees came forward this morning describing similar concerns about Mr. Bledsoe's conduct." Harper glanced at me, her expression cool, but approving. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. That afternoon, I returned to the temporary workstation near the compliance group, half expecting sideways glances or whispered gossip. But something else happened. One by one, co-workers approached my desk. Not with fanfare, just quiet acknowledgments. "Good on you, Dana. If you ever need a witness." I saw plenty. I wish I'd spoken up sooner. Even Theo, a quiet junior analyst I barely knew, stopped by with a coffee. "Thanks for standing up," he whispered. He used to talk to me like I didn't matter. His words hit deeper than I expected. For months, I'd felt isolated, like I was imagining the patterns, overthinking, overreacting. But I hadn't been. They saw it now, too. Garrett's grip hadn't just slipped. It had collapsed. By Friday, rumors were everywhere. Word spread that Garrett had been escorted from the building after attempting to access restricted files. An audit team from Denver arrived and set up shop on the 10th floor. Every vendor contract Garrett had pushed through was frozen for review. And more voices started rising, men and women, junior and senior. Stories surfaced about falsified project data, inappropriate remarks, threatened careers, cover-ups. Each new account chipped away at the wall Garrett had built around himself. The next week, I spent hours in interviews with auditors, compliance staff, and HR investigators. I didn't embellish, I didn't dramatize, just the truth. Every document matched. Every timeline held. Every timeline held. And the deeper the audit team dug, the worse it looked for Garrett Bledsoe. Late Friday evening, just as I was packing up my laptop, my phone buzzed with a message from Harper. "Preliminary findings in. Garrett's facing potential charges." "You good?" I stared at the screen for a moment, fingers hovering over the keyboard. What did I feel? Satisfaction, maybe. But more than that, a quiet sense of something settling. "I'm good," I replied. "Thank you." She responded seconds later. Thank you. "You didn't just protect yourself, Dana. You changed something bigger." I leaned back in my chair and glanced out the window. The sun had dipped behind the skyline and the city lights shimmered like they were finally exhaling. Harper was right. This had never really been about revenge. It was about refusing to let someone erase me in silence. Garrett Bledsoe had underestimated one thing: when enough people stop being afraid, even the strongest walls can fall. By Monday morning, his name had vanished from the company directory. His office, once the epicenter of intimidation and locked-door decisions, stood empty. The blinds were closed, the nameplate gone. No formal announcement was made. But in corporate America, silence is its own kind of statement. People pretended not to notice. But they did. I returned to my new desk in the compliance wing. Still technically in limbo, HR hadn't finalized my reinstatement pending the outcome of the full investigation. But I was there. I was included. I was visible again. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged. By midweek, the audit team had confirmed the scope of Garrett's misconduct: inflated vendor contracts linked to shell companies run by former business partners, tampered approval chains, falsified procurement metrics, over $750,000 in suspicious transactions. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Internal emails surfaced suggesting that certain senior managers had seen the red flags and either looked the other way or helped him hide them. This wasn't just Garrett's doing. It was systemic neglect, and it was about to cost the company. On Thursday morning, I was called into a leadership meeting, but this time, I wasn't the one under scrutiny. I was at the table, and Aubrey Carter, our CEO, was sitting at the head waiting. And that this company issues a formal statement not to praise me, but to acknowledge that silence enabled this to happen. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Aubrey gave a slow, steady nod. Agreed. That afternoon, Harper and I walked out of the building together, sunlight cutting across the pavement as we reached the parking lot. "You could have named your price?" she said, glancing at me. I shook my head. This was never about money. It was about stopping the pattern. Harper smiled a little wry. "You know, most people cave before it gets this far. They settle. They vanish." I looked at her, the last few months pressing on me like a weight I'd carried longer than I realized. Then maybe it's time more of us stopped disappearing. 2 weeks later, the official announcement was released. Clarion Ridge Holdings launches new compliance integrity initiative led by Dana Holloway. The press release was polished corporate, filled with the right buzzwords: transparency, ethics, accountability, culture reform. But between the lines, everyone inside the building understood the real message. Garrett Bledsoe wasn't coming back, and the culture that quietly protected people like him, that was under audit too. The day the memo went public, I stood at the edge of the main lobby, watching employees scroll through the news on company-issued tablets and phones. No one clapped. No posters. No welcome back signs. Just exchanged glances. Quiet nods, and that was exactly how it should be. Because real change doesn't happen with balloons or branded slogans. It starts with trust, and it grows quietly when no one's watching. My first official act as head of the new initiative was to hold an open-door session. No leadership, no note-taking, no cameras. Just a room and a chair. A space to speak. And they came. At first cautiously. Then in a steady stream, junior staffers, veteran project leads, temp hires. Some came alone, others brought friends. Some just wanted to be heard. Some carried stories that had been sitting unspoken for years. A few simply said, "Thank you." By the end of the first week, I'd spoken with more than 50 people. Some walked out lighter, others walked out with my word. This won't be ignored. I had expected this role to feel like redemption. It didn't. It felt like responsibility. And Harper said it best one night over the phone. "When you speak up, people assume it's about revenge," Harper once said. "They don't realize sometimes you're just tired of watching the wrong people win." She was right. Garrett Bledsoe's story didn't fade quietly. A formal investigation confirmed that his misconduct extended beyond Clarion Ridge back into his previous firm in Boston. Charges were filed. His name didn't land in glossy leadership features. It landed in industry alerts as a cautionary tale. I never heard from him again. No calls, no messages, no apologies. And I didn't need any. Some battles aren't won by crushing the enemy. They're won by simply refusing to be crushed. 3 months into my new role, I was called into Aubrey Carter's office. She closed the door behind me, unusual for a CEO, and gestured toward the seat across from her. "I wanted to thank you again," she said. Voice low, but sincere. "Not just for standing up, but for challenging us to do better." I nodded quietly. "I didn't do it alone." She smiled. "That's exactly why it matters." Then she folded her hands on the desk. "We're considering rolling out the Compliance Integrity Initiative company-wide, including international branches, and I want you to lead the expansion." I blinked. That wasn't just a promotion. It was a pivot point. An invitation to reshape culture at scale. "I'll need time to think," I said. "Of course." I stood to leave, but paused at the doorway. "Aubrey, People don't stay silent because they're weak. They stay silent because they believe speaking up won't change anything. Or worse, it'll cost them everything. She met my eyes. I know. Let's prove them wrong. Her smile softened. Let's. That night, I walked home through the streets of San Diego. The air was cool, the city quiet, in the way only early evening can be. I thought about the first time I sat across from Garrett back when he thought power was the ability to silence someone with a threat. I'd felt small, alone. But now I knew better. Because standing up didn't ruin my career, it reshaped it. This was never just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space people tried to push me out of. About showing others that silence isn't the only option. And maybe, just maybe, that quiet choice to resist was the most powerful thing I'd ever done. It all came back to one lesson. My father taught me when I was a kid, the smallest details create the biggest changes. A misplaced decimal, a contract clause buried on page 37, or one handwritten edit on a resignation letter. One word, one choice. The decision to speak up when staying silent would have been easier. The decision to trust myself even when the system made me feel invisible. Those weren't just career choices. They reshaped the culture around me. Garrett's removal wasn't the end, it was the beginning of accountability. And the wave that followed, that wasn't caused by a single act of rebellion. It was caused by a refusal to be erased. If there's one thing I want you to carry from this story, it's this: power doesn't belong to the people who intimidate, threaten, or control others. It belongs to the ones who know how to withstand it and still choose what's right. Thank you for walking with me through this. If you've ever been in a situation where you wondered whether standing up was worth the risk, I want you to remember something. Sometimes the smallest action, a note saved a clause, underlined, a voice calmly raised, can start a ripple. And that ripple, sometimes it becomes a wave. And sometimes that wave shifts the entire landscape. We don't always get to choose when we're tested, but we do get to choose how we respond. For me, it started with a threat in a quiet room and a pen hovering over a resignation letter. It ended with leadership responsibility, restored trust, and a workplace stronger than the one I almost left behind. But this isn't just my story. It's a reminder to anyone who's been overlooked, underestimated, or quietly dismissed. You are not powerless. You are not alone. And your voice, when used wisely, calmly, and deliberately, might be the exact voice someone else needed to hear before finding their own. I didn't tell this story for sympathy. I told it because someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe that someone is you. If you've ever been backed into a corner, talked over in a meeting, or made to feel like your silence was safer than your truth, I've been there. And if anything I shared today resonated with you, I'd love to know. Drop a comment, not just for me, but for the people reading who still feel unseen. Tell me what stood out. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me if you've ever had to choose between your paycheck and your principles. Your words might give someone else the courage to speak up tomorrow. And if you take anything away from my experience, let it be this: you don't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who holds everything together. Sometimes power is a pause, a paper trail, a well-timed question, a single word on a resignation letter. Keep your receipts, know your rights, read the fine print, and never let someone else's title convince you that your integrity is negotiable. I never wanted to be the hero. I just wanted the truth to matter, and I still believe it does. If you believe that too, share this story. Talk about it. Tell someone you trust. Or tell me. I'll be reading every comment and cheering on every person who says, that could have been me. Because it was me, and I'm still standing. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe. Not just for this story, but for the next one. Because trust me, I'm not the only one who fought back. And some of the stories coming next, you won't believe what they survived.